There's a shift that happens when you finally have real money. I'm not talking about flashes of extra income or a good month at work or a random financial win. I mean a real foundation, a level of stability that sits beneath you, quietly, almost invisibly. And what surprises most people is that this transformation doesn't look the way social media dresses wealth up to be. It isn't loud, flashy, or filled with extravagant displays. It's subtle, internal, and psychological. The world doesn't suddenly roll out a red carpet for you. Instead, something changes inside you, the way you think, react, and move through life. It's a shift so profound that once you experience it, you can never unfeel it. For most of us, life begins in a place where money feels fragile. Every paycheck has gravity. Every receipt has weight. A single unexpected expense feels like a threat, not an inconvenience. When you don't have a buffer, a car repair isn't just mechanical, it's emotional. Groceries aren't just food, they're math. Rent isn't just housing, it's survival. You don't think in decades, you think in days. And when something small goes wrong, it echoes through your week like a storm. You don't even notice it while you're in it, but that's what living on the financial edge does to your nervous system. Neuroscientists have shown that scarcity shrinks our cognitive bandwidth. Your brain prioritizes short-term survival over long-term planning. It narrows your field of vision. You don't dream, you brace. You don't build, you patch. And every decision becomes exhausting because every decision carries risk. Then, slowly, often quietly, something shifts. Not when you get rich, not when you make it, but when compounding finally becomes real. The first time your investments earn more in a day than you spent on lunch, something in your brain rewires. The first time your net worth moves more overnight than a bill used to cost you in a month, your emotional relationship with money cracks open. At first, it doesn't feel glamorous. It feels disorienting. You're used to money moving only when you move. Work equals income. No work equals nothing. But then, your money starts moving without you. Not because you hustled harder or stayed up later. It moves because capital has momentum. Investors love to talk about compounding mathematically, but psychologically, it does something else entirely. It shifts you from a world where effort equals results into a world where time equals results. And that changes everything about how you see risk, stress, and opportunity. The first time your account dips by an amount that once would have ruined your week, and you find yourself calm, that's when you realize the shift has begun. Losses don't sting the way they once did. Not because you're careless, but because you've learned that volatility isn't danger. It's just weather. It comes and goes. It has seasons. Warren Buffett once said that wealth isn't built by genius. It's built by staying in the game. When you truly internalize that, panic dissolves. You stop reacting to temporary noise because you've finally zoomed out far enough to see the map, not just the pothole in the road. And here's where the second shift happens. Expenses stop feeling like catastrophes. They start feeling like footnotes. A $600 emergency used to feel like drowning. Now, it feels like Tuesday. Not because it isn't real money, but because you've watched your portfolio rise and fall by several times that amount in a single afternoon. You've seen value evaporate and reappear without you lifting a finger. You've seen that wealth isn't a straight line, it's a tide. It flows out and it flows in. And when that becomes your new normal, fear loosens its grip. This is the part that people often misunderstand about wealthy people. It's not that they care less about money, they simply experience it differently. When your assets produce returns without your labor, your emotional center detaches from individual dollars. You no longer evaluate life through the lens of how much does this cost. Instead, you start to evaluate it through how much does this actually affect my long-term trajectory. Those are two very different questions. This shift from survival to strategy, from fear to perspective, is the real hidden luxury of wealth. It's not about buying things. It's about buying back your own peace of mind. It's the freedom to think long-term, to plan without panic, and to finally exhale. Remember when a $2,000 setback could ruin your entire year? Now, it barely even makes a dent in your graph. This shift isn't about becoming reckless, it's about becoming strategic. You start thinking in terms of resilience, not just reaction. Instead of fighting every little symptom, you focus on protecting the whole system. You stop obsessing over $40 decisions and start obsessing over the structural ones. How are your assets allocated? How is your time leveraged? How is your life positioned for the next decade, not just the next invoice? Psychologists call this future orientation. Once you feel secure in the present, your mind naturally expands toward long-term planning. You're no longer just trying to escape a crisis. You're trying to build something permanent. This is where your identity starts to shift too. Money doesn't just change how you spend, it changes how you see yourself. When you're broke, you feel replaceable, like one wrong move could erase everything. But when you have capital working for you in the background, you develop something most people never experience. Financial quiet. It's not loud confidence or arrogance. It's just ... quiet. You no longer need approval or validation. You don't have to prove anything with what you own or what you do. You start valuing invisibility more than attention. This is why some of the wealthiest people can seem almost boring on the surface. Take Keanu Reeves, for example. He's famous for his financial humility despite his massive net worth. He rides the subway, dresses simply, and gives generously without ever announcing it. It's not because he lacks resources, but because money has long since stopped being a performance for him. It's become a tool for autonomy, not a pillar of his identity. That's one of the most shocking shifts wealth creates. You don't want more noise, you want fewer obligations. You don't want more status, you want fewer dependencies. And you begin to understand a paradox. Wealth doesn't buy you more life. It buys you space inside your life. It gives you emotional margin and cognitive room. It gives you the ability to respond thoughtfully instead of just reacting impulsively. The biggest luxury isn't convenience, it's clarity. Another powerful transformation happens in your relationships. When every decision is tied to survival, you tolerate things that drain you: jobs, environments, even people, because you feel like you have to. But once you reach financial stability, that tolerance disappears. You're no longer trapped in unhealthy dynamics just to get by. Your options expand, so you start choosing differently. Sociologists call this option power. Money doesn't dictate who you are, but it does determine how trapped you are in a version of yourself you've outgrown. With resources, you can leave bad jobs, bad landlords, and bad environments. You're no longer anchored to misery by necessity. And that is one of wealth's most misunderstood privileges. Not extravagance, but escape velocity. And here's another angle that's rarely discussed. Wealth doesn't erase fear, it just reshapes it. Instead of worrying about running out of money, you start worrying about protecting your time. You stop asking, "How can I afford this?" and start asking, "Is this worth a piece of my life?" You no longer optimize for price. You optimize for meaning. That's why wealthy people often seem oddly frugal about small luxuries, but incredibly generous when it comes to education, health, travel, or creating unforgettable moments. They've seen firsthand that the greatest return on investment isn't always financial. Sometimes it's experiential, relational, or internal. Here's the most unexpected shift of all. Once your wealth reaches a certain scale, the market's movement becomes more emotionally impactful than any material purchase. Gains feel abstract, and losses feel temporary. But progress feels inevitable because you've watched compounding work its magic long enough to trust the pattern. You stop hoping things will work out. You start expecting progress, not because you're entitled, but because the system you've built no longer depends on luck. And that's when something inside you finally exhales. Money stops being something you chase. It becomes something that follows momentum. You stop living in reaction and start living with intention. Financial peace isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or victory parades. It feels like mornings where nothing is urgent. Feels like handling problems without panic. It feels like knowing that a bad day doesn't ruin your life, just nudges the graph a little. And that is the shocking truth about wealth. The real transformation isn't your lifestyle, it's your perspective. You don't celebrate because you can buy more. You celebrate because you have to worry less. You don't show off what you own, you protect what you've built. You don't fear the next storm because you finally have roots deep enough to outlast it. You see, wealth doesn't fundamentally change who you are. Instead, it removes the constant noise that kept you from becoming the person you were always meant to be. And when that realization finally settles in, you begin to understand why the people who quietly build wealth rarely feel the need to broadcast it. Because real money doesn't create a louder life. It creates a quieter one. It creates a life where your decisions aren't rooted in panic. A life where you don't wake up every morning feeling like you're already behind. It's a life where the world finally stops feeling like it's happening to you and starts feeling like something you're consciously shaping. And that, right there, is the greatest shift of all. You no longer evaluate your self-worth by how hard you work, how tired you are, or how much you struggle. You stop romanticizing exhaustion. You stop glorifying survival mode. You stop believing that suffering is proof of your character. Because once you've experienced real stability, you realize that clarity, patience, and peace create far more progress than stress ever could. You start protecting your energy the same way you used to protect your paycheck. You become intentional about who has access to you. You stop chasing relationships that are rooted in obligation or insecurity, and you start valuing genuine alignment over just getting approval. You find yourself saying no more often, not out of arrogance, but out of a newfound self-respect. Because when you're no longer fighting just to survive, you finally have the mental and emotional space to ask a much bigger, much more important question. What kind of life do I actually want to live? And that question can be terrifying for some people, because for the first time, the answer isn't limited by desperation or scarcity. It's driven by your values, by meaning, by purpose, by depth. You begin to realize that money was never really about buying things. It was about buying agency, the power to design your life instead of just enduring it. That's why real financial freedom doesn't make you careless. It makes you thoughtful. You think before you commit. You pause before you react. You choose your path before you just drift along. Because now, your time matters in a way it never could when you were just trying to stay afloat. And somewhere along the way, you recognize a profound truth. The greatest return on wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents. It's measured in the quality of your days. It's the ability to sit in silence without anxiety creeping in. It's the ability to take a long walk without mental calculations running in the background. It's the ability to experience joy without feeling a trace of guilt. And it's the ability to give generously, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but simply because you finally can. This is the part nobody really talks about. We're taught to chase wealth like it's a finish line, to treat it as the ultimate destination. But when you reach true stability, you realize it isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of a completely different one. A story where urgency fades and intention takes its place. Story where your life stops being defined by mere survival and starts being defined by conscious choice. And maybe, just maybe, that's the most shocking and wonderful shift of all. Thank you so much for watching. If this resonated with you, consider subscribing for more videos on building a meaningful life. See you in the next one.